All right, what do you expect to happen with real estate the rest of 2020 and going into 2021?
What is the future?
Yeah.
Well, so first of all, back in March when this pandemic first started, I predicted that September and October were going to be rough, and I was wrong about that. As September and October have been phenomenal. So
Who could have predicted that it would be an amazing year for real estate?
right, yeah. Well, and so there are some tricks that I didn't think were going to happen that the banks utilized that has made things incredibly good. But pretend I was a history teacher, civics, social studies teacher in high school, and
But you were a teacher.
I was. But I want to give a little background or whatever. So, and like in the time period, so I got started in the year 2000, and by coincidence, that was like one of the best times to get into real estate. And so between 2000 and 2005, real estate throughout the country increased in value 50%. So a 50% increase in the value of real estate in those 5 years, which was incredible. Loans were easy to get. We had something called liar's loans or stated income. Hey, how much do you make? I make 100,000. Congratulations, you're approved. That was it. It was just stated income.
I got one of those.
You got one of those, right? Well, it's self-employed. Self-employed, we had to. And so money was readily available. 40% of the real estate mortgages were investments or second homes. That's when I bought my second home at Emerald Isle. Banks got rich. The mortgages got packaged together. Some were AAA, some were rotten meat. All the same hamburger got mixed together. There were loans that were really bad that were rated AAA. And, we've heard too big to fail. Made a movie about it. People had a bunch of equity, and then they dipped into that equity, and people bought more cars and more real estate, and then the bottom fell out. And one of the biggest things that I realized is my grandfather said in the 40s and 50s when he bought his first house, he had to put 50% down. So people saved a long time before they bought a house. My parents in the early 70s when they bought their first house put 20% down. When we bought our first house, we ended up putting 10% down, but they told us we only had to put 5% down, and then it got to 93% down, then it got to 0% down, then the closing costs were being wrapped in. We had dozens of closings we went to where the buyers were getting checks at the closing. So something is, so they didn't have any skin in the game. They didn't have any walk away pain.
Yeah.
And so then we were in a crisis. The crisis began across the country in 06 and 07. This area was more like 07, 08. Here's something I find astounding. California, Florida, Nevada, Arizona, prices dropped 70 to 80% in those areas. So we did not have that kind of drop. But there were people that had paid $500,000 for a condo in Fort Lauderdale that was now worth $100,000. I mean, can you imagine? Can you imagine if somebody told you right now the home that you're living in lost 80% of its value? And that's what happened to some of these people. So when the rest of the country couldn't sell, eventually it started affecting us here in North Carolina. I remember I conducted an auction for 26 Chapel Ridge lots. Chapel Ridge is a golf course community in Chatham County. The lots were selling for $75,000 to $225,000. People started seeing that it was getting bad. We didn't realize how bad it was. I listed 26 lots, and we did an auction. I was opening the bids at 50% value. So a $75,000 lot, I was starting at $37,500. I was getting no calls. I mean, $100,000 lot, opening bid of $50,000. Anybody 50? Anybody 50? Anybody 50? Nothing. Crickets. I mean, and we had good attendance, but nobody was pulling the trigger. We ended up selling a few of them. I had an agent that was creative, and she said, "How about owner financing?" And so we ended up selling a few lots that night, but it was not what we expected by any means. So that's when we were starting to realize the crash was worse than we expected. I remember going on listing appointments, people sitting at the dining room table, and they got up and got sick. They had to go to the bathroom and get sick because I told them the price of their property, and they're like, you're telling us 300,000, but we owe 400,000. Doesn't have anything to do. The market's the market and everything. But then these poor people, they had 2 brand new SUVs in the driveway that they had bought from a home equity line. That was one of the problems, is people were dipping on that equity, and
Right.
prices don't always go up. Sometimes they go down. Then we started making a list of what was happening with short sales and people that were hurt with equity, and we were just tracking it to get an indication. And I remember an agent coming in and saying, my seller had to write a check for $5,000 to sell today. And then somebody said 15,000, and then it went 20, 30, 50. And then we had somebody go 75,000. We're like, oh my gosh, 75,000, that's the worst. That record will never get broken. And then we had this cute little old couple from Farrington. They owed 600,000. They had to sell for 450. They wrote a check for 150,000.
Wow.
And everybody thinks these short sales were like the bank forgives you, and they did do a little bit of that. But the banks weren't always forgiving. The banks were like, we don't care, we'll foreclose on you. Or one of the nasty things banks were doing is they were giving unsecured credit card debt at your closing. So they'd be like, okay, you're 20 grand short. Well, here, sign this, and you're going to have a new credit card that's got a $20,000 credit limit, and boom, we just put 20,000 on it. You got to pay 18.99% interest on that credit card. I mean, it was horrible what was happening to people. So, the country needed a fix. The government decided to bail out the banks instead of bailing out us. And slowly we started coming back. I remember in 2014, we were all excited because we were back up to 2003 prices in 2014. It was a slow recovery, the slowest recovery in our nation's history. And then we get up, then we got over the 2007 prices. And then we were in the recovery stage, and we had incredibly low interest rates, incredibly low unemployment, and everybody started getting excited again, and the market was ticking back up.
When was that?
I would say that started really happening in like 2015, 16, 17. It was a gradual increase, but then we've seen what's happened in the last year. And the last year, my agent's been talking for a year. There's no inventory. There's nothing for sale. Buyers are saying, I can't find what I want. Mm-hmm. And there's some complex reasons. We have the baby boomers wishing to downsize right now, and we have a high population of millennials trying to enter the market now, and they're both going after the same product. So nationally, it's that 250 to 350 that everybody's after, and prices are just skyrocketing. So we've had low inventory for a long time, and at first it was like the Raleigh area inside the Beltline, what we call the Magic Kingdom. Then Durham got crazy. Then here recently Pittsburgh got crazy. Due diligence money began to rise, prices began to rise, and we were and we still are in multiple offer situations. So you have to have a strong offer, and
so that's September 2020. There's still
multiple offer situations. If you list something in Powell Place right now for like 260, it wouldn't be crazy for someone to come in at 275, 285 right now.
Wow.
I mean, it's just there are some neighborhoods that are just so red hot. And
I thought somebody at 225 this spring was crazy. Now it's
right
285.
Yeah. I listed. I did a contract just a few weeks ago, 225, and we came in at 230. But it's not just price though; it's terms. So people are real excited about cash right now because stuff isn't appraising right now. So the agent does their job, does the comps, and says, okay, you're 260. But the market says, well, there's such a high demand that people actually start coming in at 275. But there's no comps for that, so the property won't appraise. When that happens, the buyer has to make up the deficiency. I mean, they can go back to the seller and say, hey, it didn't appraise. The seller doesn't care. They're like, I don't care, it didn't appraise. I had 3 offers, But so the buyer has to make up that deficiency in the appraisal with cash. So so we're in the midst of this incredible rebound, and then COVID-19 strikes, back in March. then we start having unemployment. One of the nasty things I mean, it's bouncing back a little bit, but one of the nasty things about unemployment is unemployment causes unemployment. And so the more you have of that, the more other people, related people, get laid off. And because of that, people are starting to miss payments. And I assumed with people missing payments, we would have a crash. But people, I didn't expect a new word that I learned called forbearance. And forbearance means that it literally means holding back. And lenders and borrowers have a special agreement to postpone payments. So this was part of the CARES Act passed by Congress. We have successfully kicked the can down the sidewalk. And it might have been the right thing to do, but that is one of the reasons why the crash that I predicted in September and October didn't happen, is because everybody's been relieved of their payments. So usually nationally, we have like 4-5% people that are in forbearance. Now it's like 9 to 15%. So a lot more. There is $16 trillion in mortgage debt. 16 trillion is what we owe in mortgages.
Is that normal?
It's not. It's the highest ever, but it's been a gradual increase. But just to give you guys some comparison, so 16 trillion in mortgage debt, free health care for everyone in this country would be 3 trillion a year. So everybody talks about, oh, we can't afford
Right.
free health care, but that's it. People talk about free college for everybody. We were just talking about college tuition and everything. 79 billion, that's with a B, going back from 79 billion. Everybody could have free college for 79 billion. So that just gives you an idea. 14 trillion, 16 trillion, staggering numbers. The interest alone on 16 trillion is estimated to be 6.5 billion per year. Just the interest, staggering numbers. So that sounds like doom and gloom, and I'm worried about the future. I don't know when. So there's nothing else that we can do now. One of the key things that we do is lower interest rates. Everybody knows you can't lower interest rates right now. That's it. They can't be lowered anymore. Forbearance is a 2 to 6 month fix. You can't keep on saying, oh, you don't have to pay, oh, you don't have to pay, oh, you don't have to pay. Eventually the banks have to ask for payment. So forbearance can't go on and on. So two things are going to have to happen. Either prices are going to have to go down, or people are going to get foreclosed on. So my proof is try to get something refied right now. Try to get a new loan right now. Try to get a home equity line of credit right now. The banks are not giving it. They're super, super tight. And banks are preparing for a drop in value. So the only option is to be real aggressive right now. And so when someone says to me, Eric, I'm thinking about listing my house in September, October, but I might wait until June because the prices will be even higher. I don't think that's the case. I think the market is a projectile, and it goes up and then it goes down. And I think we're at the peak of the bubble right now, and it's going to go down in the next few months.